Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan, Operation Southern Watch, Iraq, Theater of Operations, Europe, Middle East, decorations and awards, Merit, Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal, Air Force Commendation Medal, Air Force Achievement Medal, Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, Air Force Organizational Excellence Award, Combat Readiness Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Kosovo Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism. Makes me wonder what I've been doing. Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism, Air Force Longevity Service Ribbon, Air Force Training Ribbon. Without further ado, our speaker today, Colonel Wayne Scott.
Thank you. Were there many ribbons? It sounds impressive, but you know. My mother, I think, is the only one who would probably be impressed by that. Appreciate the opportunity. I've had. I really enjoy time with fellow veterans, those who have worn the uniform, those who have defended our nation. I will tell you that today's presentation is actually about something I did after I retired. It is related to the military. If I was listening properly, I think all of the aviators we have in this room actually flew rotary wing aircraft. I didn't hear any fixed wing pilots. This is actually going to be about a system that the Navy is now using for fixed wing aircraft called the Joint Precision Approach and Landing System, or JPALS. I will start by answering the question that I was asked when I did a presentation about JPALS for the Raytheon company when I was working for them. When a retired four-star Navy admiral wanted to know, why the hell did we have an Air Force colonel, retired Air Force colonel, running a Navy program? And here's the reason. The reason is because my favorite naval aviator, and one of the things I learned as a child, is the Navy does not have pilots. The Navy has aviators. And this is my favorite naval aviator. This is my dad. He flew fighters off of straight deck aircraft carriers back in the 1950s. He was in during the Korean War. He did not go to Korea. He actually deployed to the Mediterranean twice. But he was at sea on an aircraft carrier when I was born. So I've got naval aviation in my blood. I think you would probably all recognize the fact that naval aviation, any kind of aviation, is hazardous. Naval aviation can be particularly hazardous. I want to show you something here. Pete, can you click on that? So sometimes it can be a little bit hazardous landing on an aircraft carrier. This particular video is proof positive that any landing you can walk away from is a good one. Navy pilots have a moniker that I will not repeat in mixed company about the excitement and danger of landing on an aircraft carrier. I saw a couple of smiles. Some of you who know what that phrase is. Come and ask me afterwards. I'll be glad to relate it to you. But again, not to repeat it in mixed company. So what I'm going to talk about, Navy already has several landing systems on their aircraft carriers and on their helicopter landing systems, LHs, and I'll talk about that as I go through. So why do they need this particular one? I'll talk about that, what it is, what it isn't, how it works, the different parts of it, how accurate it is. And that's really why the Navy wanted to do this, is because the accuracy that the system brings to carrier-based naval flight operations is incredible. We also were, at the time I retired from Raytheon, I was leading an effort to develop an expeditionary variant of this that we call EJPALS. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then give you the latest program status that literally comes up through about the last month or two. On an aircraft carrier, there are already multiple landing systems. Why? Well, because different aircraft are equipped with different landing systems, different capabilities. The Navy's intent when they started the JPALS program was to replace all of these systems with JPALS. The problem is the cost of retrofitting the entire carrier-based air fleet to use JPALS turned out to be cost prohibitive. So the system right now is only on the newest Navy and Marine Corps fighters, the F-35B and the F-35C. although it has been so successful that they're talking about integrating it into the F-18 and possibly some other aircraft. But the systems here, the Spin 41B, there's actually two parts to this. It's basically an instrument landing system. There's one part of it that gives you a vector or two of the center line of the runway. There's another one that gives you a glide slope. You follow those, you fly some needles in the aircraft, and it'll lead you to that touchdown point. The primary one they use is this thing called IFALS, which is an optical landing system. If you've ever watched Top Gun movies or anything else about naval aviation, you hear a pilot when they come along and they call the ball. When they call the ball, basically what they're saying is they can see these lights, and they're using that visual indicator to fly a glide slope down to the touchdown point on the deck of the carrier. There's also a TACAN, which is used by multiple, both military and commercial aviation. Just gives range and bearing to a particular point. And then the Spin 43 is actually a search radar, like an air traffic control radar you'd find at an airport. And then, of course, we're adding JPALs, and I'll talk about specifically what that is. But why did the Navy want to move to JPALs? And this is a heads-up display from an FA-18. This is an FA-18 cockpit video from the Persian Gulf. If you're not familiar with the heads-up display, I've got right here is airspeed, 130 knots. Right here is altitude, 400 feet. So if I'm at 130 knots and 400 feet, I either have just taken off or I am just about to land. But I don't see anything in front of me here. So Pete, if you click on that video, this will show you why the Navy was really interested in doing something like JPALs. So now I'm, again, 120, 130 knots, I'm down to 300 feet. There's nothing in front of me. I'm down to 250 feet. I still can't see anything. I am down to 200 feet. I can't see anything. 170, 160, 150. Oh, wait a minute, there's an aircraft carrier out there. And so about 2 seconds before he lands, he can actually see what he's going to land on. I'm sure that was one of the guys who experienced those parts of what a naval aviator experiences during a carrier landing. So, because of this kind of a scenario where weather conditions, sea states, things like that can make it extremely hazardous to land an aircraft carrier, that's why the Navy wanted to develop the JPAL system. So what is it? It's an aircraft landing system. It's on the, I told you, F-35B and C. The F-35B is the STOVL, short takeoff vertical landing variant used by the Marine Corps, replacing the Harrier. The F-35C is the carrier-based variant of the F-35. It's also planned for the Stingray, which is a program the Navy is working right now where they're, believe it or not, they're going to have an unmanned tanker aircraft to refuel aircraft that are either coming or going from the aircraft carrier. Used on the CVMs, the aircraft carriers, also the amphibious assault ships, LHs. It is GPS based. All the other systems that are currently, that were in use prior to JPALs on board the aircraft carrier, many of them still in use, are radio or visual based. And so there's a significant electronic signature associated with using those systems. Accuracy, 50 centimeters, okay, that's about 20 inches. Accuracy, I'm actually going to show you that we actually proved that it's way better than that. Integrity, continuity, and availability. Built into the system is our cross-checks and comparing GPS signals so that the data that's being received by, the JPAL's data being received by a pilot flying a JPAL's approach can be highly confident that the information is accurate and it's reliable. It's not a flight controller. It's not directing the pilot. The pilot is still flying the airplane. Navy flight doctrine is pilots fly airplanes. Air Force flight doctrine is pilots fly airplanes. We don't allow computers to fly airplanes. However, JPALs is capable of being coupled to the flight controls in F-35. So under extreme hazardous conditions, Sea State 5, an injured pilot, extremely poor visibility, I can actually couple the JPALs to the flight controls, and I can do a full auto land of that aircraft using JPALs.
Real quick, is it in the background while they're landing? Like, is it smart enough or quick enough? Is it in the background as that pilot's landing? And if something happened, it could take over like that, or no? It has to be activated and it would literally take over controls.
It has to be activated. It's driving instruments on the control panel for the pilot to use to fly the same kind of approach that he would under another system. It's just more accurate. But they have to engage auto land for it to use that capability. So again, it can be used by a flight controller to auto land the aircraft. Military is well known for coming up with acronyms, aren't we, right? And so, believe it or not, the Navy came up with something called Magic Carpet. And believe it or not, it actually stood for something. Now, how many guys spent how many hours sitting around a table trying to come up with maritime augmented guidance with integrated controls for carry, approach, and recovery, precision enabling technologies? Magic Carpet. I mean, who wanted to make sure it said Magic Carpet? Now, Magic Carpet literally is the precision landing mode for the FA-18. It's only on the FA-18. It's only on these models of it. What it does is it couples to the flight controls, and it will actually make adjustments to the throttle and the control system. So the pilot, it basically is reduced. It's designed to reduce workload as a pilot is flying an approach. So he's basically just going to be using his stick to guide to the touchdown point, and then Magic Carpet will make small adjustments in flight controls and throttle controls to achieve that landing. So it was just designed to make it easier for that pilot to land the FA-18. But still, the computer is not flying the aircraft, it's simply assisting the pilot. So right now it's being delivered to the United States Navy Marine Corps. I'll talk about where we are with the current status of the program in a little bit. It is exportable. It was designed to be built for export to certain allies, and in fact has been already installed on aircraft carriers for 2 allied countries, and was just awarded through a foreign military sales contract to a 3rd country. I'll talk about that at the end. Supports hover points for rotary aircraft and STOVL approach to the F-35B. So could I incorporate this system into a rotary wing aircraft and use it to get to a specific touchdown point for a specific LZ or something like that? Yes, it could be done. It would have to be integrated into those other platforms. Secure anti-spoof, anti-jam. A lot of discussion over the past several years about an adversary jamming GPS. Our military has become very, very reliant on GPS technology, not only for navigation, but even for targeting various weapon systems, including artillery, rockets, things like that. And so there is a threat there to GPS. I have been asked on many occasions, well, what happens if your GPS system is jammed? If an adversary is close enough to my aircraft carrier to jam JPALs, I have more of a problem than just whether or not I can land my aircraft. I've got a more significant threat, but it is GPS based. Data links can support 50 different touchdown points within a 20 nautical mile radius. So I could actually, we're going to talk about the expeditionary version toward the end of this, but I could put a system out there and I could have multiple LZs, multiple touchdown points within that radius. I only need one system to be able to land aircraft at each of those points. Sir?
Colonel Scott, so you said the locale has to be close to your carrier group, but what about the killer satellites that are being deployed supposedly to knock out multiple satellites for GPS use?
By everybody's definition, attacking another nation's satellite is an act of war. And so, again, if it got to that point, having a GPS-based landing system for aircraft carriers is only one concern. I've got a nation that's obviously planning on some kind of a full-scale general war attack on our nation at that point. Sir?
You said it's pilot operated and computer assisted, if they miss the trap on the hook, what happens? Can the pilot still pull up?
Oh, absolutely. The pilot is still flying the aircraft. The standard Navy flight operations, carrier ops, where they basically have enough fuel for 2 passes and then a tanker. That's why the unmanned tanker thing is kind of related to this. That they have enough fuel for 2 passes, then they would refuel and be back in the pattern. But yeah, no, it's still, if there is, as a matter of fact, because the pilot is, the computer can more rapidly respond than the pilot in some cases. And so if I've got a JPALS equipped aircraft that is on short final, and the LSO, landing safety officer, hits the abort button so the IFALS lights all flash, the time that it takes to get that data through the system so that JPALS is aware of a wave-off signal, we have actually built in a shorter loop on that, so it will, if there's an abort signal, it'll actually change the aircraft to straight level instantly. Touchdown points, availability, integrity, continuity, talked about that a little bit already. So how does it work? Again, GPS based. I've got a constellation of GPS satellites. My aircraft is using those. My carrier is using the exact same GPS constellation. And then I have data link messages going back and forth, and I'll kind of do that stage by stage. George, question?
Yes, does that system have the ability to recognize that the pilot not capable of firing the airplane will automatically take over?
It will not automatically take over. Someone has to command it to put it in an auto land mode. It will not automatically take over. There are, and we'll take a look at once the aircraft gets within 60 miles of the carrier, there are various data elements that are incorporated, and one of the things that a pilot can include in there is duress, injury, those kinds of things.
So what happens if the pilot cannot switch into whatever he has to do? He's totally capable. Will it switch over to the LSO? What happens to that pilot?
Again, because Navy flight doctrine is pilots fly airplanes, the system isn't going to automatically take over an aircraft under any situation. The pilot is going to have to specifically take an action to implement that. If he is too injured, if the aircraft is too damaged for him to safely land the aircraft himself, now you're getting into a situation where the pilot is likely going to have to eject from that aircraft. I mean, I can't build a system that can automatically take over based on any number of scenarios in which a pilot may not be able to successfully land the aircraft. If anything, the problem is going to be a pilot is probably more likely to be well, strong, confident, saying, I can do this, and have a problem that he doesn't want to turn it over to a computerized auto land system. He would rather fly that approach himself, which far more likely to get a successful landing that way.
Earl Scott?
Sir.
Airliners today, if the aircraft, the pilot, and the airport are qualified, the pilot will fly that aircraft down to the ground. At any time, that pilot of a commercial aircraft, like military, is in charge. You can disconnect everything and fly the airplane.
Absolutely true. Yes, there are auto land systems on a lot of the newer commercial aircraft, but the pilot has to engage that, and the pilot can disengage
I
it.
used to fly the DC-8, DC-10 back in those days. They have auto land. They auto land quite a few times. It's not new.
Well, I agree it's not new. What's improved is because of some of the augmentation systems is that the level of accuracy is what has improved over
Even
time.
then, when that pilot flying that aircraft, that wheels hit the deck, that pilot always will go full power because he's ready for go.
Yeah. Step one, the way the system works is when an aircraft is starting its return to the carrier, when it hits 200 nautical miles, the system automatically logs into the JPALS network. What happens is the ship is using both GPS and inertial nav to have its position, and then it uses an encrypted data link and it broadcasts that position information to the aircraft. So at that point, at 200 nautical miles, the aircraft uses the same GPS, it does its position. JPALS then does a calculation about where I am, where is the carrier, it gives me range and bearing, a lot like a TACAN would in terms of where, I'm 200 nautical miles out, where is the carrier now, what direction do I need to go? And so that's what it does, and does not require additional or new instruments on in the instrument panel of the aircraft. It literally drives the existing instruments. It's the same kind of thing that the pilot would use a TACAN to know range and bearing to his intended landing spot, in this case the aircraft carrier. When I get to 60 nautical miles, it moves into a new mode called surveillance, and now it establishes a two-way data link. And so not only am I still getting range and bearing information from the carrier, but now the aircraft logs in and gives aircraft ID, type, altitude, speed, lat, long, the kind of things I would get from a radar. So I can actually have this information without the radar, without the carrier's radar being turned on. And it feeds it into the air traffic control displays on board the carrier, same kind of information they would see if it was being painted by the ship's radar. Oh, by the way, it's also continuing to do that RailNav data transmission all the way out to the aircraft that are still out at 200 nautical miles. When I get within 10 nautical miles, I get into precision surveillance, precision approach mode. So again, there's no action from the pilot required to change that mode. Once it knows it's within that range, it now goes into this precision mode. And now I've got a bunch more information available that comes to the carrier related to aircraft performance, aircraft position. And still doing differential GPS on this, and so, but now I'm tracking not only lat and long, but any deviation, any minor variations in airspeed, any drift from the intended path to the aircraft carrier. And this is now, I'm going to see all this information on the display, which is in the air traffic control center on board the aircraft carrier. And when I get to where I'm on final approach, again, not a different instrument on the aircraft panel. Literally, I'm flying the same needles that I would fly if I was flying a Spin 41 instrument landing system kind of an approach. So to do all of this is what we install on the ships. There are 4 racks of equipment. It's actually 2 racks of equipment, but it's 100% redundant. I've got 3 inertial measurement units. So because when I'm getting in close, I not only want to know kind of where the aircraft carrier is, but I want to know what kind of motion have I got involved with this thing. Those of you who have flown either fixed wing or rotary wing aircraft, you think roll, pitch, yaw. Well, that's because my touchdown point is not moving. If I'm landing on an aircraft carrier, I have to account for 7 vectors of motion. It's not just roll, pitch, yaw. I've got surge because how fast the carrier is moving is going to change. I've got sway because based on currents and waves, my deck is going to shift left and right. And I've also got heave, which is, again, based on currents and wave action, my entire deck is going to move up and down. So now I got 6 vectors of motion. But oh, by the way, the carrier is going this direction, but my landing area here is offset by 15 degrees. And so my runway is actually moving away from me at an angle. And so I have to account for all of those vectors of motion to successfully get this aircraft to its touchdown point. I've got GPS sensors. I've got UHF antennas that are there for the data link. And then I've also got service panels and whatever. So in the air traffic control center on board the carrier, I can see what the operational status is of the system when I'm in flight recovery operation. So, how do we measure success? Sir?
You've also got wind speed and direction variation.
Absolutely true. I'm just talking about motion vectors of the aircraft and the deck itself, but you're right, I've also got wind speed and direction to account for as well. So what am I trying to do? I'm trying to put the tip of the hook, the tail hook, through a 3-foot by 3-foot box, 14 feet above the deck, while the aircraft is flying 120 knots at night or in bad weather, while the ship is pitching, rolling, and heaving. And all I got to do is make sure I get through that little box there with the tail hook, because at that point I've got 3 wires. Okay, there's no longer a 1-wire. There's a 2-wire, a 3-wire, and a 4-wire. What the Navy does, they target the 3-wire, Navy aviators, they target the 3-wire, so if they're short, they hit the 2-wire, if they're long, they hit the 4-wire. But they target the 3. JPALS is so accurate that they actually made us put in the ability for the air traffic controllers to move the touchdown point to the 2-wire or the 4-wire, because we were wearing out the 3-wire and not hitting the 2 or the 4, because we can literally hit the same wire, the 3-wire all the time. So, just by comparison, for those of you who've flown commercially, some have, all right? This big blue circle, this is a Cat 2 ILS. 100-foot decision height, 1,200 out to 1,200 feet from my touchdown point. I get down into a Cat 3 ILS, I might be at a 50-foot decision height, 328 feet from touchdown, or 656 feet from touchdown. And this little red dot here in the center, that's how accurate JPALS is. We like to say we're not trying to land here, we're trying to land right here. Literally in this circle, there's a little 2-inch by 2-inch plate, and there's a little dot in front of that. And we are literally measuring the touchdown point from that dot. So, how accurate? That accurate. That's 20 centimeters, about 8.5 inches. Okay, the width of a sheet of notebook paper. The hook isn't much smaller than that. So literally, we can bring this aircraft in with this kind of accuracy and safely recover aircraft. The Navy Program Office is PMA 213 at Pax River. Their motto is bring them back alive, and this is one of the ways they're bringing them back alive. Because it's been so successful in testing and early operations, and even in deployments before it was declared IOC, the Navy and Marine Corps asked if we could look at is there a way to make this expeditionary, rather than only having it on aircraft carriers and assault ships. Could I have something that I could use in a deployable environment? And so the last job I had with Raytheon before I retired, it was a lot of fun, is we took the system and put it in 4 transit cases and found some stands to put these GPSs in and we actually, this is actually a Marine Corps Air Station, Yuma, and we went out and did a demonstration out there where we surveyed this thing, put this system in, and we were bringing Marine Corps F-35Bs in and landing them within a few feet of the desired touchdown point. Several of the pilots were experienced, some were actually flying it for the first time. I can tell you briefly that they simply loved it. So latest status, actually the USS Wasp was the first one to actually deploy with the system and went to Westpac in 2017, was used extensively. Was interesting that they were at Yokosuka. They did a deployment to the Indian Ocean when there were some things going on in Afghanistan. Marine Corps actually launched some F-35Bs to do strike missions in Afghanistan. They were recovered on the Wasp using JPALs. So technically the system was demonstrated as combat capable and combat ready a couple of years before it achieved IOC, initial operational capability. Raytheon Technologies was awarded a $234 million contract in 2019. I actually developed a proposal. I simply didn't stay with the company long enough for that to be awarded. They ordered 23 systems to put on all the CVNs and all the LHs. First production system was installed on CVN 70. We were just talking about that a little earlier. It was actually fully installed 1 month ahead of schedule. They completed operational test in 20. They actually took our expeditionary JPALs up to an exercise in Alaska in 2021 and used it there. The reason I was interested in that it included the CVN 71 and VFA 31, the Tomcatters, is that's actually the squadron my dad flew in the Navy. The 22 of the 23 systems have already been delivered. The last one is being installed now. The UK has put it on already on one of their 2 new aircraft carriers. It is slated to go on the other one as well. Italy has put it on their newest aircraft carrier, the Cavour. So the Italians are using it with they're flying F-35. They call them aircraft carriers. They're really the equivalent of our LHs, landing assault ships, helicopter assault ships, because they're buying the F-35B, not the F-35C aircraft carrier variant. And then just a couple of months ago, I actually went to Japan twice in 2018 to start this effort, but Raytheon was awarded a foreign military sales contract for Japan to put it on their newest aircraft carrier for their F-35Bs also. And so, again, it was designed to go international, and we've already got 3 allies that are either have installed or all are installing it as well. I finish up with this thing right here, unmanned aerial vehicle. This is an MQ-25. The Navy had a program called U-Class Unmanned Carrier Launched Airborne Strike and Surveillance. Was talking to Bill Scott a little bit earlier. The problem with the U-Class was the air refueling people wanted things on it, the launch people, or the strike people wanted things on it, the surveillance people wanted things on it, and eventually you get to the old adage about, what is a camel? It's a horse that's been designed by a committee. And so they were trying to put too much on it, so they basically have changed the program, something called C-BARS, carrier-based air refueling system. And they're actually using these, they've already done some tests with them, actually using them for tankers, actually putting one up in the sky and being able to refuel aircraft coming and going from the aircraft carrier without having to have a pilot. The alternative, what the Navy has been using for years, is using an F-18 with 3 long-range tanks on it as a tanker, which is a really, really expensive way to fly a tanker. And then this is F-35 landing on the USS Wasp. Kind of blew through that pretty fast, but I've had a couple of questions that went along. Yes, sir?
You mentioned the LSO, but this system is even better than the Cat-3 automatic system that they had in the F-18. The LSO is kind of useless. He's not going to be able to see the airplane until it's on the deck.
The LSO still has a critical role in the sense that while the system is designed to very accurately land the aircraft, the LSO now has a responsibility to make sure that we don't have a fouled deck, that there's not something apart from the actual landing system that make it dangerous to land on that deck at that time. Because I've got to reset cables, I've got other things going on the deck, and so the LSO primarily has a responsibility You're absolutely right. He doesn't have his normal responsibility of he's too high, he's too low, he's too left, he's too right, he's in the wrong position, he's in the wrong attitude, and so I'm going to give him a wave off. It's more, is there anything on the deck that would prevent a safe landing at this time?
On the F-18s, do they have the auto land capability, or do they just have was that something that was just demonstrated and isn't operational yet? Because they had pictures of it like 5 or 10 years ago.
The Magic Carpet system is on the FA-18. Again, it's not a full auto land, it's a pilot assist workload reduction capability on the FA-18. Because JPALS is not on the FA-18 yet, but because it has been so successful with the F-35, I had actually started a program before I retired where the Navy is looking at, okay, what would it take to add JPALS to the FA-18 because of the capability that it brings.
Well, when you're in a 0-0 situation, the autopilot, even on the old airliners 30 years ago, did a much better job than the pilot was ever going to do.
Agreed. There have been systems that have allowed that very, very precise down to 0-0 poor visibility. The difference is none of them have the availability and reliability of JPALS. I mean, I can count on this giving me that 0-0 capability 24/7.
How well does it do with a pitching deck?
I've not flown it. I've been told by some pilots who have flown it that it gets really interesting when you're, when you're in your last half mile, because it's literally, it's not so much that. It's pretty much staying level. It's that as the deck is going up and down, my aircraft is starting to change that because as it's adjusting. I'm literally sending, when I'm in that last half mile, I'm literally updating the position of the touchdown pointing and sending it to the aircraft every couple of milliseconds. And so it's literally driving those needles, and I'm probably updating it faster than the pilot can respond to.
So it does a good job of flying formation to the deck, but the poor pilot can get airsick.
I suppose that is a possibility.
All right, we have time for about one more question. All right, over here.
I'll get two.
Two more questions, I meant. Oops.
Colonel Scott, you be okay?
Go ahead.
Just shout it out.
Colonel Scott, by design or by accident, the pilot is able to override the data or any other computer operation for the aircraft. Whether it's by design or accident, does that keep an enemy from trying to control, jam the computer system, or take it over, much like we hear in the news about computer hackers getting into the computer system at the sheriff's department or back in the southeast, controlling water for the directions water.
So can be hacked into.
The data link between the ship and the aircraft is encrypted. So I can't. It's anti-spoof. I shouldn't be able to. Although I might be able to generate a signal that says the GPS location is different than what JPALS is saying. The fact is I can't meet the same encryption and send that signal to the aircraft that would cause it to go elsewhere. That was one of the hard and fast requirements from the Navy when we designed and built this thing.
In the case if something goes wrong, the pilot can take over.
In all cases, as a matter of fact, the exact reverse is true. The pilot is flying the aircraft using that information. He has to decide he wants to use auto land because of a high sea state, because of something else that is going to make landing extremely difficult, if not impossible. It's tested up to sea state 5, 30-foot seas. And so, but pilots fly airplanes, and the pilot can decide whether or not he thinks it's beyond his ability to safely land the aircraft, in which case he can put it in auto land mode.
All right, I know there's other questions out here.
I'll be glad to talk about it after, yeah.
We have acknowledged Victor as the last question. If you have another question for Colonel Scott, please save it till the end of the day. We do have a second part to today's events.
During our, during our stay at Raytheon, we were in LRP mode, right? My question is something to do with supply and demand or material availability. The quantities were very small, so we could not negotiate a good price. We could not negotiate. We could not.
The question has to do with supply chain, I think, and availability of parts. There's low rate initial production and there's final production. The fact is, we only built 23 systems. It never got above low rate initial production. Never had a problem with availability of parts. We also had obviously subcontractors. The radios were all built by Rockwell Collins, and so getting access to the right parts to be able to build and field the system was never an issue.
Well, we had a problem with the deliveries because of the short quantities.
Yeah. Finish up real quickly with two things because I know we need to get to the awards presentation. By way of announcement, this year's 50-year anniversary since the return of the POWs from Vietnam. They're having a 50th year reunion at the Nixon Library in 2 weeks. They're having a special exhibit called Captured, Shot Down in Vietnam, specifically about the experience of the Vietnam POWs. They've even replicated a cell from the Hanoi Hilton in the display. That's going to be opening on the 24th of May. Admission to this exhibit is included with admission to the Nixon Library. It's going to be open for several months. For those, a lot of you are Vietnam vets, if you'd like to go understand what our POWs went through, especially at the Hanoi Hilton, might be worth seeing this exhibit. And the other thing is, in 2 weeks, we're having this 50-year reunion for the POWs. They're having 3 POWs from Hanoi Hilton. They're going to do a panel discussion at the Nixon Library on May 25th at 10 a.m. That admission to that is free, but you do have to go on the Nixon Foundation website and request a ticket because they expect the interest in attending that to be very, very high. Already had one announcement about a Memorial Day activity, a lot of them going on, including ours, but we have the co-founder and past president of the Society of the Honor Guard of the Tomb Guards, who's going to be speaking in Yorba Linda at 2 p.m. that day. Should be a really fascinating presentation if you're interested in hearing about the Tomb Guards and also how the process they went through to select the first unknown soldier from World War I. Thank you.